quick vid on watts per kilo and why it's fake. Fake news, basically. So we look at watts per kilo here. So we have the second version of this for Andy Cog, and it's got slightly higher values than the pink and blue one, which is also a bit sexist, but anyway, we can ignore that for a bit, as not all male riders like blue. But anyway, so you can see, let's say we go on to my 5-minute power, let's say, so any 5-minute power. So to be exceptional, so we're going to ignore categories, because category is bollocks anyway, because let's be honest, they're all fake. This is slightly better, but like, having an FTP of 5 watts per kilo does not make you category 1 racer, because your weight, it changes so much. So I'd say, especially here in the UK, I'd say 90 to 95% of races are more about raw power than watts per kilo. Maybe watts per kilo is important at very extreme, so if you're like 90 kilos and you have an FTP of like 3 watts per kilo, or 4 watts per kilo, let's say, you can do 360 watts, you're not going to be competing in a lot of races, maybe necessarily, because when it does go uphill, you're just going to be struggling, compared to people who have maybe 350 watts, but 70 kilos or something like that. So maybe it does matter in the very extremes, and also in the other extremes, so let's say you're a 50 kilo rider, you've got an FTP of 6 watts per kilo, 300 watts, you're not going to be competing at the highest level, national B races, national A races, just because you're just too small, basically. You might excel on the climb, so it'll be very hard in the UK, especially. Another places maybe like Italy, where a lot more of the races are hilly, then yeah, maybe it might be more valid, this thing. But for the UK, it's just not really that valid. Another thing is your FTP and your watts per kilo are also very relative. So if you're a lighter rider, you having 5 watts per kilo, and let's say an 80 kilo rider having 5 watts per kilo for 20 minutes, let's say, the 80 kilo rider is far fitter than the 60 kilo rider, because they're so much heavier. So on the flat, they'll destroy the 60 kilo rider, and on the uphill, he'll probably go faster, the 80 kilo rider, because he's just generating more power, assuming roughly similar aerodynamics. Especially like on a 5% climb, the 80 kilo rider would just destroy. So again, like, if I'm a lighter rider, 60 kilos, let's say, so for me having a FTP of 5 watts per kilo, it's not that impressive, really, in the greater scheme of things, because I am very light. So I should have a higher watts per kilo. Like when I started cycling, my 20-minute power is 4 watts per kilo, like 240 watts, which maybe to some people is insane. They can't believe it. But it's like, if you're a 100 kilo rider, and you're obviously starting at 4 watts per kilo will be insane, because you can hit 400 watts for 20 minutes, which is very respectable power. So FTP and watts per kilo are very mainly watts per kilo. We did a different video on FTP, so watch that. I'll link it at the end. But the watts per kilo is just so relative compared to your weight. And also the other thing is, like, these things aren't very accurate for races, because a lot of professional races, their absolute power, yeah, it's very, very good and a lot better than what I can ever do. But it's not insane. It's more that they can hold very close to that power for such a long time, because their endurance is so good, because they spend so long on the bike. And if you watch, even in the domestic British scene, you'll see that the Prem, which are like 160 kilometers or longer, 180 kilometers, the professional riders always do better. And on the shorter races, it's not always true. The amateur riders can keep up, because their fitness levels are not that dissimilar. But the professional riders, they've been riding for so long, maybe they do week-long stage races, they build that endurance, and they can just hit those real close to maximum values the whole time. So again, this chart doesn't really say that. I think it's good as an initial indicator, and I think Andy Cog said he disliked putting the categories, because the categories are rubbish, because 6 watts per kilo for 5 minutes is just not very good, like, for a Cat 1 racer. Like, it's just not that impressive. And like, I think a lot of people who are Cat 3 or Cat 4 or even Cat 2 could hit that numbers. Like, when I used to be a Cat 4 racer, an FTP of 5 watts per kilo. I mean, it's like, it's irrelevant. Like, but that was only 300 watts my FTP. So yeah, obviously I upgraded to Cat 3 after finding a couple of hilly races, because it was quite simple for me. But at the same time, like, other people who are 80 kilos, like 300 watts is just like, what is like less than 4 watts per kilo. And so for an averagely fit person, like, they'll just destroy me on the flat. Which is whenever I ride in London, like, I find it hard to stay with the really, really fast people on the flat, just because they are so much bigger than me. But when it comes to the climbs, there's just not even a competition for a lot of these people, because I am so much lighter. But again, this chart doesn't show you that. It doesn't show you that actually power on the flat is so important. Like, there are some exceptions. It's like Kenny Ellison, who's 52 kilos. but he's an exception. I like when you watch him in team time trials, he struggles because he just cannot put the power physically to actually do it on the flat. Like, let's say he's hitting 7 watts per kilo for 20 minutes, which would be absolutely insane. He'd still only be doing 300 and, like, 364 watts? And that for a professional for 20 minutes is not very impressive at all. Like, Paddy Bevins hit like 460 watts on for half an hour at Rocker Cobra or something on the previous video we showed. So, like, the difference is so insane. But on the climbs, if you can do a job in a professional race, then yeah, this chart is very important. And I feel like, but the thing is, for a lot of people, is that their races aren't going up 2 hour, 1 hour, half an hour, 20-minute climbs even, especially here in the UK. Maybe in other places, I really want to go to them. There are races, but even like smaller races, they often don't go up climbs. They often have small, short, punchy climbs, which is where your 1 minute and your anaerobic capacity is more important, but not your outright capacity, your ability to do it repeatedly, which I think is one thing that this chart just doesn't show. Sprinting again, we'll just do a quick last thing on the sprinting. I've talked about the longer efforts, but again, 5 seconds, 20 watt per kilo. Let's say me, I don't know what I can do. We'll have a quick check on my 5 second power here. Seconds, watts per kilo. So I can hit, what is 16.13 watts per kilo for 5 seconds. Where does that put me? That puts me as good category 3, right? But that's actually irrelevant, because 16 watts per kilo for me is about 900 watts or something. Yeah, 954 watts, which is just embarrassing. But let's say 16 watts per kilo at 80 kilos, then you start to run races, because then all of a sudden you're hitting, 1200, 1300 watts, and that's like respectable numbers. Again, like, obviously acceleration with me is insane, but this is the thing, the chart doesn't show that, like, your weight and your absolute power is more important. Like, on the minute things, it's important when you're going for like over 6 watts per kilo. Yes, then I agree, the couple kilos doesn't matter. But realistically, it's very hard to win races if you are very light and have incredible watts per kilo but very poor watts. But then at the same time, it's very hard to win races if you have incredible power. Let's say you weigh 200 kilos. Let's just imagine some ridiculous thing. You 200 kilos and you have an FTP of like, I don't know, 450 watts, so you have 2.5 watt per kilo FTP. Like, in theory, you should just be able to go on the front and just ride away from everyone, and maybe on the flat, but as soon as you get to a little incline, you're just going to get gassed easy. It's going to be really hard for you to keep up. So, again, the extremes is like, yeah, the watts per kilo does matter. But in the middle, let's say from the average rider is probably 60 to 80 kilos, average rider is probably 65, 75, that's probably is roughly like a nice normal distribution. So in the between 65, 75 kilos is just who can put out the most watts, really. I mean, obviously weight is important, but that's the main thing, because that allows you, if you have a higher FTP, it just allows you to chill out on the flats, so you don't have to exert as much energy, and then when it comes to the climbs, you can really show what you're made of. So altogether, also the 5 minutes, like 7.6 watts per kilo. I mean, Dan Evans did 8 watts per kilo for 4 minutes, and he's an amateur, so I'm pretty sure the professionals can get over 7.6 watts per kilo for 5 minutes if they were really trying, like a maximal effort, like not in a race. FTP for 6.4, I don't, maybe that might be right. I'm not sure. I know climbers have put out 6.4 watts per kilo, like James Knox did for 20 minutes, and he's just a neo-pro, so maybe 6.4 watts per kilo FTP could be right, but I'm still skeptical of that. And the sprint power, again, the fastest sprinters are 80 kilos. The 80 kilo riders putting out 2,000. They're more like a 100 kilo rider, and they're putting out 2,500 watts. And maybe that's right for the very world class sprinters. But in order for the track sprinters and the road sprinters, again, the chart's just slightly wrong. And for the 1 minute power, again, I can do 600 watts for a minute, roughly, maybe a little less. That puts me in exceptional domestic pro / cat 1. Yeah, but 600 watts for a minute isn't very impressive. I mean, some people will be hitting 800 watts for a minute or 900 watts for a minute if they weigh like 80 kilos and they hit 11 watts per kilo or something like that. I mean, it's different. It's very, very, very different. So when you're comparing your power, you've got to think, where do I race? Is it just only uphill? Am I an anomaly? So does watts per kilo matter more? Or should I just concentrate on hitting the watts, dropping a bit of kilos, and just ignoring this. Like, it's nice to compare yourself to the pros. I like it. I get it. I like to do it on Strava segments. But you just have to remember this chart is just not that accurate. It's good at tracking your progression, and it's good at showing you where you are relative to other people in terms of, like, is your 5-second power amazing or is your FTP amazing? But don't get caught up on it and think, if I make, let's say, 6 watts per kilo FTP, I will be a World Tour rider. Because the thing you don't realise is most World Tour riders have an FTP of 6 watts per kilo, or close to that, especially if they're like 65 to 70 kilos. So that's the other thing, is like, if you want to be a climber and you have an FTP of 6 watts per kilo, you're not going to be a climber, because there are people who are 70 kilos who can do it. But if you're 80 kilos and have an FTP of maybe 6 watts per kilo, then we're talking. Or if you're 80 kilos and smash out 480 watts, then yeah, then we're talking. But if you're 60 kilos and you smash out 6 watts per kilo, that's just not that impressive for a climber. So you've got to think, your body weight is important, but it's also where you are on that scale. So I hope I haven't confused too many people. I've sort of got a bit confused myself in trying to wrap this video up. But just remember, racing is where you can tell what category you are. Watts per kilo matter on a climb. Watts per kilo matter maybe in a sprint when you're accelerating. Most of the time it's just pure watts and what you can do for 20 minutes on the flat, on a TT, because that is where most races are won or lost. Cheers for watching. See ya.